Now, let's go straight back to Donald Trump's promise to build a wall on the border with Mexico and increase vetting of people coming into the United States. To the wall first, because building a 3,200-kilometre-long wall was one of Trump's key election promises. He said it'll cost $8 billion to actually put up, and it will be about 12 metres high. Well, let's get reaction to all we've heard from the president. Let's go to Washington and talk to Dr. Zainab Chaudry from the Council on American-Islamic Relations. Thank you so much for being here with us on the programme. Let's talk about that wall in a little more detail. Your reaction to what you've heard from Donald Trump?
You know, it's deeply disturbing learning, just over less than a week ago, Mr. Trump stood in front of the nation and in front of the world, and he pledged to uphold the Constitution. He took an oath of office to uphold the Constitution. And over the course of the last several days, we've seen executive order after executive order that has undermined some of those rights and values that have been enshrined within Constitution. So that's deeply disturbing. The idea of building a wall. Now, one thing I think is important to point out is that there is a wall that currently exists along 1/3 of the border between U.S. and Mexico. The United States pours billions of dollars every year into border security and enforcement of that security. And yet we saw between the late 90s, early 2000s, the population of undocumented immigrants in the United States doubled, almost nearly doubled, according to some reports. The notion that we could, afford to spend more money building a wall that will not keep out, undocumented immigrants, that only, according to some reports, prevents migrants from returning home, it's just something that I think we really have to re-examine what our values are.
So you think it won't work in practice, and even in principle it is wrong?
Even in principle, it's absolutely wrong. I think it sends the wrong message. The United States shares a $1 trillion treaty with Mexico. We enjoy trade with our neighbors to the south, and I think it sends the wrong message. It creates a us versus them dichotomy that further alienates our neighbors to the south. And I think that
talking about messages, I mean, this is something he said he would do, and now he is doing it. You have this whole problem of illegal immigrants in America. That has got to be addressed, doesn't it? What is your solution?
I think any policy that focuses on addressing the issue of undocumented immigrants or illegal immigrants, I think it needs to be approached ethically. And I think those populations, those ethnic communities need to be a part of that solution. I think the government unilaterally creating policies and executive orders or signing off executive orders that unfairly discriminate against specific groups or minorities, it doesn't protect our national interests. It doesn't protect our security. I think we've spent every year we pour up to $8 billion into border security and creating a wall. I mean, during the Women's March over the weekend in Berlin, someone held up a sign, walls don't work, ask us, we know.
Sure, but I was asking you what your solution is. Just briefly, you've said that his solution won't work. What is your solution?
I think any solution, and these are experts that have to be part of that solution process, I think any solution has to involve the groups that are directly impacted by these policies. And I think creating a wall is not that solution. Creating a wall is not going to be effective. It's not going to keep out people who are determined to come into the country. There obviously has to be there has to be some kind of action taken to protect our government and our country and our interests from forces that are posing a threat and that are dangerous otherwise.
And presumably you extend that to that other area we've been talking about, extreme vetting, the executive order we're expecting on that as well. Do you understand even what extreme vetting is in terms of the additional measures they are planning to take, and do you think it will make America any safer?
That term itself is so ambiguous. The current vetting process that we have in place, specifically as it pertains to refugees entering the United States, is already very thorough. There's a very extensive process that lasts anywhere from 18 to 24 months that refugees must undergo and be able to pass in order for them to enter the United States. And historically, we know that refugees pose very little, if any, threat to our national interests and to national security. Over 800,000 refugees have entered the United States since 9/11, and of those, a very tiny amount have ever been convicted or charged with any kind of, terrorist activity. And they were not Muslim. And I think part of the problem of this executive order is that we expect it to focus dominantly on Muslim-majority countries.
And do you feel Muslims there in America feel under threat? Briefly and finally.
Absolutely. I mean, it creates a us versus them dichotomy, and it sends a message to American Muslims and to the Muslim world that we do not have a place in our country, that our religion is the problem. And I think that any kind of policy that unfairly targets or discriminates against any group based on race, religion, sexual orientation, or what have you is especially problematic, and it needs to be reevaluated.
Doctor, we have run out of time, but it's a pleasure talking to you. Thanks very much for being with us here on